In the autumn of 1971, the USS Saratoga carrier battle group was sprinting across the North Atlantic. The Saratoga is a floating city. Powered by 8 massive boilers, she can hit 33 knots. At that speed, she is, historically speaking, very difficult to intercept. A World War II diesel sub creeping at 10 knots is left in the dust. Even a standard nuclear attack submarine doing 25 knots cannot keep up for long. But on this day, the sonar operators heard something impossible. They picked up a contact. It wasn't lying in wait ahead of them, it was behind them, and it was catching up. The contact closed the distance. It pulled alongside the carrier, and then, terrifyingly, it accelerated. It passed the Saratoga as if the American carrier was standing still. The U.S. Navy had just met Project 661. The Soviets called it Anchar. NATO called it the Papa class, but its crew called it the Golden Fish. Why? Because the budget overruns were so extreme that the sailors joked it would have been cheaper to cast the hull out of solid gold. This is the story of the fastest submarine ever built. It is a machine that pushed engineering to the breaking point, terrified the Pentagon, and helped bankrupt the Soviet Navy. It is a story of titanium, radiation, and the deadly price of speed. To understand why the Soviets built this monster, you have to understand their fear. In the late 1950s, the U.S. Navy introduced the supercarrier. These ships carried nuclear bombers that could incinerate Moscow from the safety of the open ocean. The Soviets had no way to stop them. Their existing submarines were too slow. If a war started, the U.S. carriers would simply outrun the Soviet subs, turn into the wind, and launch the apocalypse. So, in 1958, the Kremlin issued a desperate directive: build a carrier killer. They demanded a submarine that could do 38 knots underwater, fast enough to chase down a nuclear carrier, fire a salvo of cruise missiles, and escape before the American destroyers could react. But there was a problem. Steel is heavy. To build a ship with that much horsepower, a traditional steel hull would have been too heavy to accelerate to those speeds without requiring an engine of absurd proportions. So, the Soviet engineers made a decision that was scientifically brilliant and industrially insane. They decided to build the entire hull out of titanium. Titanium is the holy grail of naval architecture. It has an exceptional strength-to-weight ratio compared to steel. It is non-magnetic, making it invisible to magnetic mine detectors, and it never rusts. But it has a dark side. Titanium hates oxygen. Titanium is highly reactive. At welding temperatures above 400 degrees Celsius, it avidly absorbs oxygen and hydrogen from the surrounding air. This creates a brittle, contaminated layer known as alpha case. If you weld titanium in a normal room, the weld becomes as fragile as glass. Under the crushing pressure of the deep ocean, the hull would simply shatter. To build Project 661, the Soviets couldn't just build a ship, they had to build a new world. At the Sevma shipyard in Severodinsk, they constructed Building 42. It was a massive assembly hall designed to be airtight. For small parts, they used sealed chambers, but for the massive hull sections, they couldn't fit them in a box. So the solution was to put the men in the box. The welders wore pressurized moon suits supplied with breathing air. They walked inside habitats flooded with argon-rich, oxygen-free atmosphere to perform the welds. It was an industrial nightmare. Productivity collapsed. Men fainted from the claustrophobia. It took years just to weld the hull. But when they were done, they had a ship that was lighter and stronger than anything the West possessed. Now they had a light hull, they needed an engine to push it. People often confuse the Papa class with the famous Alpha class. Both were titanium, Both were fast, but the Alpha was a sports car. The Papa was a drag racer. The Papa didn't use experimental liquid metal technology. It used brute force. It was powered by two massive VM5M pressurized water reactors. The twin reactors produced a combined 355 megawatts of thermal energy. This drove steam turbines generating 80,000 shaft horsepower. For context, the Sturgeon class, the standard U.S. attack sub of the era, produced roughly 30,000 horsepower. The Papa packed nearly 3 times the power into a hull of similar size. With a titanium body and an 80,000 horsepower heart, the beast was ready. On December 18, 1970, the captain received a secret order. Take the ship to the testing range and see what she can really do. But before the record run, there was a warning. A year earlier, during her first sea trials, the designers at the Malahite Bureau promised a top speed of 38 knots. The captain pushed the throttle to 90%. The log ticked up. 38 knots, 40 knots, 42 knots. It was a triumph. But outside the hull, physics was fighting back. At 42 knots, hitting the water feels less like sailing and more like digging through concrete. The dynamic pressure, the force of the water hitting the ship, increases with the square of the velocity. The titanium hull could take the pressure, the external fittings could not. The hydrodynamic drag tore external fittings and heavy hull penetrations free. The debris was sucked backward into the main circulation pumps, shredding the secondary cooling loop. The ship limped back to port. It was fast, but it was self-destructive. The K222 was literally tearing itself apart to go faster. Most navies would have slowed down. The Soviets reinforced the hull and decided to go faster. 1 year later, the K222 is back. Captain Golubkov has orders to find the absolute limit of the machine. They submerge to 100 meters. This is the Goldilocks depth, deep enough to avoid surface waves, but shallow enough to minimize hull squeeze. The captain orders 100% reactor power. But the engineers hesitate. The steam turbines have automatic safety interlocks, the TGU protection system. If the turbines spin too fast, the computer is designed to trigger an emergency shutdown to prevent a meltdown. To break the record, they have to disable the safety. Golubkov gives the order. They bypass the TGU. They are now running red line. If something goes wrong, the computer won't save them. The throttle is opened wide. 80,000 horsepower pours into the shafts. The log hits 44.7 knots. That is 51.4 miles per hour underwater. It is a number that shouldn't exist. There are rumors that they actually hit 44.85 knots on a second run, but the reactor parameters were so unstable, the core was on the verge of a runaway that the commission threw out the data. 44.7 knots. It remains to this day the fastest speed ever officially recorded by a combat submarine.
Welcome to the edge of the impossible. This is Apex Engineering.
Why is 44.7 knots so impressive? Why can't a modern American sub do it? It comes down to a brutal rule of hydrodynamics called the cube law. The power required to move a submerged body increases with the cube of the velocity. The formula is P proportional to V cubed. This means if you want to double your speed, you don't need double the power, you need 8 times the power. Let's look at the math of the K222. To go from a standard 30 knots to 45 knots is a 50% increase in speed, but because of the cube law, 1.5 cubed equals 3.375, it requires roughly 3.4 times the power. This is why the K222 needed 80,000 horsepower. To go just a little bit faster than an American sub, they had to build a reactor plant that was nearly 3 times as powerful. They were fighting exponential math with exponential money. But as they celebrated the record, the crew noticed something else. The ship wasn't just fast, it was loud. The K222 had broken the world record. But inside the hull, there was no celebration. There was only pain. At 44 knots, the submarine wasn't gliding, it was vibrating violently. The turbulent water rushing over the titanium hull created a cavitation roar that defied belief. Reported internal noise levels approached 100 decibels. That is equivalent to standing next to a pneumatic drill. The vibration was so intense that light bulbs unscrewed themselves from the ceiling, and instrument dials blurred so badly they couldn't be read. In submarine warfare, silence is life. A typical American submarine operates at the volume of a whisper. The K222 operated at the volume of a rock concert. Tactically, this was suicide. The U.S. Navy's SOSUS listening arrays, located on the ocean floor thousands of miles away, could detect the K222 at extraordinary distances. One U.S. Navy sonar operator described the acoustic signature not as a submarine, but as a freight train running through a tunnel. The Golden Fish was the fastest ship in the ocean, but it had a giant neon sign pointing right at it. But the noise didn't just alert the enemy, it blinded the K222. Sonar works by listening, but if your own ship is screaming at 100 decibels, you can't hear anything else. This is called self-masking. Above 35 knots, the flow noise over the K222's bow was so deafening that its own bow-mounted sonar system was useless. The hydrophones were completely saturated. This created a deadly paradox. The K222 could sprint to the target area at 44 knots, but it would arrive blind. To find the American carrier, it would have to slow down to a crawl to use its ears. And the moment it slowed down, the Americans, who had been tracking the noise for hours, would be waiting to kill it. Despite these flaws, the K222 had one moment of glory. In the autumn of 1971, she was deployed to intercept the USS Saratoga. The American carrier group was steaming home at full speed. They thought they were safe in the deep Atlantic. The K222 found them. For hours, the Soviet captain toyed with the American fleet. He would sprint ahead, submerge, let the carrier catch up, and then sprint past them again. He was doing donuts around a nuclear supercarrier. The psychological impact was immense. The U.S. Navy realized that speed alone was no longer a defense. This single event reinforced U.S. concerns and accelerated existing programs like the high-speed Los Angeles-class submarine and the Mark 48 A-cap torpedo. The K222 had scared the West, but the sprint had broken the ship. When the K262 returned to port, the engineers found something terrifying. The titanium hull was cracking. It wasn't the welds, it was the metal itself. The failure mechanism was delayed hydride cracking. Titanium absorbs hydrogen over time. Under the stress of deep diving and the high-frequency vibration of the engines, the hydrogen formed brittle hydride crystals inside the metal matrix. These crystals acted like tiny wedges, splitting the alloy from the inside out. The outer hull, the fairings, the ballast tanks, was riddled with fatigue cracks. The ship had to spend 3 years in dry dock from 1972 to 1975 just to fix the damage caused by its own power. The Golden Fish was spending more time in the hospital than in the ocean. And then came the final blow, the accident that didn't just break the ship, but poisoned it. By 1980, the Golden Fish was an aging warrior. She had been renamed K222 and was back at the shipyard in Severodvinsk. While workers were performing a maintenance check on the reactor's automatic control rod mechanisms, something went wrong. It wasn't a massive explosion. There was no fireball. It was a mechanical failure in the complex, custom-built machinery that managed the reactor cores. In a standard steel submarine, this would have been a difficult but manageable repair. You cut a hole in the hull, replace the machinery, and weld the patch back on. But the K222 wasn't steel. It was titanium. The accident damaged the reactor plant's service systems. To reach the damaged components, the shipyard would have to cut into the pressure hull. This meant reactivating the airtight argon chambers, the moon suits, and the specialized welding teams. The cost projection to simply access the broken part was astronomical. The Soviet Navy looked at the bill, they looked at the cracks in the hull, and they made a decision. They didn't fix it. The ship wasn't destroyed by a torpedo or a catastrophic meltdown. It was destroyed by its own complexity. The golden fish had become a white elephant, an asset so valuable it couldn't be thrown away, but so expensive it couldn't be used. She was tied to a pier, her reactor cores cooling, and left to rot for the next 30 years. Before we bury her, we have to clear up a common mistake. History often confuses the Papa, Project 661, with the Alpha, Project 705. They were both titanium, they were both fast, but they were opposites. The Alpha was a tiny, automated interceptor powered by a liquid metal reactor. It was like a fighter jet. The Papa was a massive cruise missile truck powered by water reactors. It was a dragster. The Alpha was mass-produced. They built 7 of them. The Papa was unique. Why? Because of economics. The K222 cost so much that the Soviet leadership canceled the rest of the class. It consumed resources equivalent to multiple conventional submarines. The golden fish was simply too expensive to clone. Even dying was expensive for the K222. She sat in the water until 2010 because nobody knew how to cut her up. You can't cut titanium with standard oxyacetylene torches. It catches fire and burns uncontrollably. To scrap the ship, they had to rebuild the same specialized infrastructure they used to make her. It took them decades to figure out how to safely remove the damaged reactor cores and slice up the billion-dollar hull. Today, the only piece left is the sail. It sits in a park in Severodvinsk, a tombstone for the era of extreme speed. The K222 Anchar proved that you can beat physics. You can build a submarine that goes 45 knots. You can build a hull out of titanium. You can outrun an aircraft carrier. But it proved that the price of beating physics is uselessness. The K222 was a tactical failure. It was blind, it was deaf, and it was fragile. Today, no Navy tries to go that fast. The modern submarine is a black hole. It does 30 knots, not 45, but it is silent. The golden fish taught us that in the ocean it is better to be a ghost than a race car. She was a magnificent, terrifying, billion-dollar mistake.